In a world asking the question, what if the movies that got delayed came out on time and they were different? That's the case in my universe. I'm Steven Schinder and you're listening to Delayed Replay, Season 5, airing every other Saturday, unless I change my mind. Hello, listeners. Welcome to another episode of Delayed Replay, that podcast where we recap and review movies that got delayed in that other universe, but came out on time in our universe. I'm your host, Steven Schinder, and this episode we are talking about the Fantastic Four First Steps. Now, for this particular episode, I've got a team of 4 of us on the call. So there's me, the Delayed Replay Steven, and the other Steven, and we, from the universe where things got delayed, and another Steven whom we reached out to in yet another universe where instead of humans, there are rock people, and yeah, so that's a whole thing. And there's also a universe where there's like a female version of us, but she's having a bad connection, over this app. So she's typing in the chat and, it's very staticky, and so she's muted herself and her camera's off. So she very much is an invisible woman in this episode, but I mean it's audio only anyway, but we'll read her thoughts as we do the conversation. So to make things less confusing, and I guess as a way to sort of carry over some stuff that's been going on recently, having recorded the audiobook version of our novel Lemons Like Rain, having done multiple character voices, we're each going to talk in a way that's kind of reminiscent of the way a couple characters in the book sound. So as Delayed Replay Steven, I'll be speaking like this. Hello, I am Delayed Replay Steven. And the Steven from the other universe, how are you gonna be speaking? I mean, I already know, but just show an example to the audience. So I'm gonna be speaking like this. This is kind of how Randy from Lemons Like Rain sounds, and I think you're doing sort of an August voice, right? Yeah, kind of sounding like how I did voicing August from that novel. And I am just gonna talk like this. It's clobbering time. Okay, yeah, that's how the rock guy Steven is gonna sound. And like we said, we're gonna be reading the invisible one in her thoughts in the chat. Right, so where should we begin? Like, I don't know, thoughts on previous Fantastic Four iterations? I mean, it's mostly similar between each of us from what we talked about in the pre-show. Yeah, so there's the 2005 Fantastic Four, and I don't even know if I'm talking exactly how one of my book characters sounds, but as long as I sound different, it's okay. The 2005 Fantastic Four was the first adaptation that I experienced, but a little while before that, maybe in 4th grade, there was some sort of reading day thing going on at school, and there was this comic book that showed the Fantastic Four, and they encounter Impossible Man, and it was kind of silly, and basically the ending of it had them all like saying that you should read, basically Reed Richards, one might say. Oh, yeah, I don't remember that pun being in the comic, but oh, it wasn't. I don't think so. I mean, I barely remember. It was so long ago. Oh, okay. Yeah, so the 2005 Fantastic Four, that was my gateway too, but I didn't see it in the theaters. Did you? No, I don't think so. Um, Probably rented it a little bit later once it was available to be rented. And then Rise of the Silver Surfer, I remember watching that at a screening at my middle school, like once it was available on DVD. But I do remember the trailer being kind of hype. Yeah, the trailer was intense with Human Torch flying up, chasing Silver Surfer. I remember watching the 2005 movie after having played Marvel Ultimate Alliance like 2006 ish, maybe '07. Um, yeah, maybe closer to 6 because it would have been before the Rise of the Silver Surfer trailer came out. Yeah, and I do remember thinking that the music in Marvel Ultimate Alliance might have been derived from that Fantastic Four movie and maybe the Raimi Spider-Man movies, but I think I could be wrong. Yeah, I too remember thinking that, but I think music just of those superhero things from Marvel sounded kind of similar, so it kind of just bled together in that time period, probably. But yeah, I remember really liking the 2005 film, and also by the time Rise of the Silver Surfer came out, being familiar with Marvel Ultimate Alliance, was very confused about why Galactus was a cloud. Yeah, that was a terrible decision right there. Because you expect Galactus to be this giant that just eats planets, and he doesn't appear. He only appears very briefly in the video game Marvel Ultimate Alliance, but that idea just captivated the imagination. So it was disappointing seeing him as a cloud, but Silver Surfer looked really good. I still enjoyed some of the humor in the movie, but looking back, some of the stuff in those movies probably hasn't aged well, really. Yeah, it really is of the time. Yeah, I'm just looking in the chat to see what the female version of us is saying. So she says that like the way that it was very guy centric. Some of these movies of that time would be very different if made today. And I mean, we have gotten different today, but like the actors interestingly casted, but there's been some weird revisionism lately where people are saying, "Oh, this is the best version of the Fantastic Four," and it's like, I don't know about that, Yeah. Um and of course there's a 2015 reboot Fantastic Four, Fantastic according to the marketing. And that one, I didn't watch that one until I was studying abroad in England 2 years after it came out, and I think it was on Netflix, and so I watched it there, and I didn't think it was as bad as people were saying, but it was still pretty bad. Yeah, the thing about that movie is the way that they react to getting their powers feels realistic, and it's played off like a horror movie, and it's an interesting idea and feels very Chronicle, which was director Josh Trank's movie previous to that. But it's an interesting way to play it off, but had no place in a Fantastic Four movie of all things. Yeah, that reboot was a real bummer. Um, And there was the 1994 version. Oh yeah, the one that was made, well, at least in my universe, was made solely so that the rights to Fantastic Four adaptations could be retained by whatever company that was at the time. And there's a whole documentary of the people who were involved in that movie, and they seem like the actors, they seem like they were very earnest and very dedicated to learning about the source material, which is a real shame because what you see of the film, it doesn't really look that great. Like, it might even be worse than the 2015 reboot. I'm blanking on what the documentary is called. Oh, here it is. Doom, the Untold Story of Roger Corman's The Fantastic Four. Kind of interesting they call it Roger Corman's, and I think he was just a producer, but I guess producers have a huge influence on the whole thing. Actually, what was Roger Corman's role on this? I'm trying to remember. Was he in... Oh, executive producer. Okay, so yeah, that makes it even weirder. Oh, so... Wait, so I think before we went on here, you were telling me that the 1994 movie didn't come out in your universe, right? Yeah, that's right. It was made just to keep the rights to Fantastic Four adaptations. Like, there's a loophole saying that as long as a Fantastic Four movie was made or in production or whatever, the rights could be retained, and but it didn't say that they had to release it. So, and if you watch the documentary, the people involved, the actors, they seem very earnest and like they were so dedicated to the source material that to do research on the characters. But like what you see of the movie, like it doesn't look very good. Maybe even worse than the 2015 film. Even if it does get into a more comic booky spirit than the 2015 film. Oh wow, in my universe it was a success. Maybe part of it was because, with my universe having people made of rocks, the Thing was the only non-rock character, and he basically became this fleshy blob thing, and people were really impressed with the effects when making the film, so I guess maybe they had more confidence. Wait, hold on. So, I'm trying to wrap my head around all this. So, in your universe, we know there are rock people, but instead of rocks, is there like flesh or some variation of flesh? Well, it's complicated, and it's not all one-to-one, but mountains definitely have a fleshy, basically they have a fleshy aesthetic. It's really sciencey. I can't really get into it. It would be such a long conversation. Okay, well, we'll table that then. I don't want to spend too much time on that. But yeah. Also, along the way, I'd seen the 1994 Fantastic Four animated series and the 2000s Fantastic Four World's Greatest Heroes animated series. I thought that one was decent, but neither of these were quite as popular as some other Marvel cartoons. Yeah, I remember seeing those like between high school and college, I think, or maybe late high school. I don't know. It was the early 2010s, trying to watch all the Marvel animated things that were available on Netflix at the time. Yeah, so that brings us to the Fantastic Four First Steps, part of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Now, in my universe, it's pretty much the same as in the delayed replay universe, just, rock people and a flesh thing person. Like the plot is basically the same, but I guess we'll be referring to the delayed replay version. Let's see. Our woman version of us is saying that it's pretty much the same in her world as well, just genders flipped and whatnot. She says that looking forward to how this would get adapted into the Marvel Cinematic Universe is a huge thing. Because trying to figure out how it would fit with it aesthetically, and then it turns out it is still involved in the multiverse, which she had mixed feelings about going into it, but there were some things that she kind of liked about it. It opened doors doing this multiverse thing because it gave the film a 60s aesthetic. Yeah, that's the thing. This film takes us to an alternate universe where the Fantastic Four are around in the 1960s, and they are there's this news report that kind of recaps things and tells us their origin, and also that like brief glimpses of other Marvel heroes who are around at the time. We don't really see them unmasked. They pretty much get some nobodies to play these. Like we get Spider-Man and Iron Man, but they don't take off their masks. But they look so classic, so Silver Age. We even see a Grey Hulk very briefly, but it's kind of a blur. We don't really see the face. So how do you all feel about that? Well, I don't know. I guess it was kind of fun. I think I'm just really burnt out on nostalgia and cameos and stuff like that. But I do appreciate that these weren't actor returning cameos, like these, it was the characters we don't see under the mask, so it doesn't really take you out of it because we get to know them as their superhero personas. These Silver Age versions of the Avengers, we see glimpses of like Captain America and Thor from afar. Thor wearing the helmet, and Ant-Man and Wasp. So they kind of shrunk down, so we couldn't really see them that well. But this alternate world where basically the MCU happened in the 60s, but the Fantastic Four and the X-Men are around. So it feels like it's presenting a world where all the heroes were already under one umbrella, as they ideally should have been. Although I guess you could argue that not having them under one umbrella for so long caused filmmakers to try to be creative, and there have been, depending on who you ask, mixed results, positive and negative. Yeah, I quite like how they tell the origin story of the Fantastic Four. So, in this version, because Reed Richards is super smart and he's around, the moon landing happens in the early 60s. And basically, he and Sue Storm, as well as her brother Johnny Storm and Reed's best friend Ben Grimm, they are astronauts in this, and they end up flying to the moon. And that's when, on the way, before they come back to Earth, they do the whole thing of planting the flag and musing about, how small they are in a big universe and possibly multiverse. Um, I see that the woman us is typing in the chat saying she cringed when they mentioned multiverse so prominently in that moment. But yeah, as they fly back to Earth, they hit these cosmic rays. Yeah, the cosmic rays are what give them their powers. And so they get back to Earth, and yeah, also want to mention how weird it was that Tom Hardy is a version of Wolverine in this. We know Tom Hardy having played Venom, but apparently Matthew Vaughn wanted him or a Tom Hardy type to play Wolverine in some sort of X-Men First Class sequel, which would have taken place in the 60s. So, yeah, just want to mention that briefly. But, yeah, they come back and they each have the powers that they're best known for. All that is explained in a newsreel and also shown in flashback. Yeah, and I do like that this movie is not solely a flashback film. Once we get to know how they got to be who they are, it pretty much does this montage, and showing all the other heroes that arise and, protests about mutant rights and the arrival of the Avengers coming together. A few years later, Reed and Sue, they've been married and they have a baby named Franklin Richards. They get to see his first steps, and that kind of feeds into this title. Yeah, I see in the chat, let's see, she's typing, first steps has multiple meanings in this film. It could refer to Franklin Richards' first steps. It could refer to the first steps on the moon. In this universe, those steps belonging to the Fantastic Four. And could refer to the first steps of Galactus toward Earth and whatnot. Yeah, I quite like the multiple meanings of the title. I had some reservations when I first heard it, and it sounded kind of cheesy, but looking at the aesthetic of the film, it really works, I think. Yeah, I think I'm in agreement too. So we mentioned Galactus. Before the whole newsreel thing and explaining the Fantastic Four origin, they do begin with a sort of prologue showing Galactus going to this world. Yeah, so Galactus goes to this planet. It's called Zen Law, and the Empress there is Shala Ball, and her partner is Norin Rad, who would normally become the Silver Surfer, but here, and I don't know if they're, not having read the comics, I don't know if she becomes the Silver Surfer at some point, but in this instance, Galactus is about to leave the planet, and then Norin Rad, he offers himself as a servant in exchange for, the world not getting destroyed and, the woman that he loves not getting eaten either. And you think he's going to become the Silver Surfer, but then Galactus smites him, smashes him with a fist. Yeah, this feels very much like an extended, 2-hour live action What If episode. And it's really disappointing how, What If is apparently ending with season 3, if I understand that correctly. I feel like it should be limitless, and they're just ending it with 3 seasons when they haven't fully tapped the potential, but I digress. But yeah, this very much feels like what if the MCU were in the 60s, but also, uh, you know, Shala Ball became Silver Surfer right away. Yeah, like once Norrin Rad is killed, she mourns him, and then Galactus has her become the Silver Surfer in exchange for her world not being destroyed. So I thought that was an interesting way of turning it on its head. Yeah, and I do kind of like how they got Doug Jones to play the Silver Surfer again, but of course, glorified cameo, and they got him off the board real quick before Shala became the Silver Surfer of this universe. Yeah, it does make for a strong opening, I think. Like, I don't know, what's the reaction been amongst people in the delayed replay universe? Well, so this film, it came out in July, but we're putting this episode out like a month after the fact. But there were, the usual people posting on social media like, oh, why do these movies hate men? And, the overreactionaries, and, I think they're just like really reaching, and they're really annoying, and I just kind of scroll past them. I don't pay too much attention to them. Yeah, it can be really depressing, like having a lot of that in your feed. Yeah, I just clobber the posts and block people. Oh, she's typing. Oh, yeah, she says that she will block people too to make them invisible. Yeah. Right. So getting back to the movie. So they do the prologue with Galactus, and then they do the origin of the Fantastic Four, a montage showing all the heroes and stuff. And then after Franklin Richards is a thing, his powers of warping reality are hinted at. Like, we see him sort of shifting things around. Like, he is able to open up doors to other universes, and like, I guess this was unavoidable, but he opens portals that show the other versions of the Fantastic Four. Yeah, like we see the Roger Corman version, the 2005 version, the John Krasinski iteration, which I know that, that team had somewhat of a role in your version of Wakanda Forever in the delayed replay universe, but in my universe, they pretty much brought John Krasinski as Reed Richards and these other cameos basically just to die, and it was really disappointing. And I didn't like how the cameos were handled in, with the returning people in Deadpool and Wolverine either. So here it felt like they were wondering what was going on, and for the 2015 Fantastic Four, there was a door and they pretty much just closed it. But they closed the door on the others as well. So I thought that was refreshing that they didn't necessarily have a huge role to play in this. Like, they only showed up while Franklin Richards was alone, and then his parents come into the room like unaware of like what's been happening, like his powers that are manifesting. Yeah, it feels very Jack and Fantastic Four, although I guess you could say The Incredibles probably took a lot from the Fantastic Four. There's Elastic Girl, who actually shares a name with Elastic Girl from Doom Patrol. But yeah, she has stretchy powers, and there's sort of a similar, 60s aesthetic. So there's that. But yeah, the reality warping powers alert Galactus, make him very curious about what Franklin Richards could do. Like, he could be used as a weapon. And so Galactus is heading towards Earth. And, along the way, he eats up a planet made of clouds. It looks like Bespin from Star Wars. Yeah, you just know that was a dig at Rise of the Silver Surfer. Um, you know, uh, the Cloud Galactus, it was a take that type of thing. Yeah, I thought that was kind of funny. So, Galactus, I do like the scale of the sense of scale with Galactus. I really didn't like the Eternals movie that came out in my universe, but something I think it nailed was how to depict the Celestials. These spacey, gigantic things. And with Galactus, they took that to another level, and he looks really good here. You gotta hand it to Ralph Ineson. And, the rest of the cast as well. Julia Garner as Shala Ball, Ebon Moss, Backrack as The Thing, Joseph Quinn as a Human Torch, Vanessa Kirby as Invisible Woman, and Pedro Pascal as Mr. Fantastic. I know there were sort of reservations, at least in my world, about Pedro Pascal being cast, because he's basically in everything, but I think he really nailed this role. Definitely was given a better script than Wonder Woman 1984, at least the one in my world. Oh yeah, he played Maxwell Lord. I almost forgot about that. Now, there's also Kang, who, because of the multiverse and stuff, he's played by John Boyega. This iteration of Kang is played by John Boyega, and he's also trying to get a hold of Franklin Richards, whom I think is an ancestor of him. Um, yeah, like the dialogue is very quick. I feel like if there's a weakness to this movie, it's that some of the lore dumpy info happens kind of quickly. And I think that's kind of overcompensating, trying not to bog the audience down too much. But I feel like there are moments where this movie kind of needed to slow down a little bit. Yeah, I can agree to that. Oh, I disagree. I think it should have been a bit faster, more action. Oh, but it looks like the womaness agrees with the rest of you, so, what do I know? Yeah, and she also says that she quite likes how Invisible Woman touches on sexism, and it's like her presence as a heroine, in this universe kind of accelerates the process of, making amends over that sort of thing, trying to lessen the sexism in this earth. But it kind of feels like, like the world is changing for the better. So when Galactus is threatening the world, it feels like, oh no, all that progress could end up being for nothing if everyone's just gonna die. Yeah, the stakes really go up to 11. Spinal Tap style, you could say. And of course, there's a fight with Silver Surfer. The Fantastic Four, they confront her. Um, but, they showcase their powers really well. But Shala is really giving them a run for their money. I see here that, let's see, what is she saying? Um, okay, she says that the heart-to-heart talk between Sue and Shala felt very real. I like that they were basically uh, having a very human moment and trying to talk about, having more agency and, how she's able to convince Shala to turn against Galactus. Yeah, I quite liked that. I thought the dialogue was handled very well. The acting is pretty good. Like, I think John Watts, who directed the Spider-Man movies, he did a pretty good job with this. Yeah, and I know some people, they think that the Spider-Man movies he directed are just Iron Man Jr. movies, but I thought the trajectory they ended up going was a pretty great one. I'm honestly really annoyed by some of the Marvel fans online and all the debates that they have. Yeah, it's like that in multiple universes. I almost forgot to mention that one of the villains who is kind of a focus in a small portion of the movie was Mole Man. And they got John Ratzenberger, of all people, to play him. The Underminer from The Incredibles. Yeah, I thought that was a reference too many. Like, this movie doesn't go as much on the cameo overload as some other superhero things, but it does have like a bit of a fraction of that, and it did bother me a little bit, but I do love hearing John Ratzenberger's voice, very classic. I did think it was a bit cheesy when, Shala, as the Silver Surfer, she discovers surfer rock music, which I guess are an emerging thing in this time period on this Earth anyway. And when they go up against Galactus, she summons some space whales and some space waves. I don't know what these are. They're like this liquid space thing that she's able to summon, and she rides them. And I don't know if this was a thing in the comics, but it seemed like a really like cheesier than you would normally expect for these movies. Yeah, I think since this was a late thing in the movie, I kind of bought into it, even though it was kind of ridiculous. I think overall I was sort of in awe about how we were finally seeing a live action Galactus the way he should have been, and seeing the Fantastic Four fight them, and having them with this 60s aesthetic, and maybe a little bit of early 70s. But yeah, it's a story about saving the child, and I couldn't help but think, Pedro Pascal, as great as he is as Reed, feels kind of typecast. In Mandalorian, there's a whole thing of protecting the child. I've only seen the first episode of The Last of Us, but I think there's maybe a vibe there. Wonder Woman 1984, he also, has to question whether to do good by his child. That movie's a blur, but I vaguely remember something like that. So, it kind of feels like he's been typecast a bit. I see that. Let's see, what is she typing here? She says having Sue involved makes this different enough, in her opinion. So it's like a set of parents as opposed to just the Pedro Pascal of it all. He didn't get as much screen time as you would have expected. It feels like the rest of the team get more screen time, if anything. Okay, yeah, that's fair. Yeah, I don't know. I guess I focused more on the Pedro footage, but maybe that's just because of the familiarity compared to the other actors. Yeah, and I gotta say, they do a great job playing these characters. Johnny Storm has some of the cockiness, but is also very, there are moments where he's vulnerable and insecure, and he opens up to Ben Grimm, of all people. And I also like how Ben Grimm, he's at a point where he's been like this for a few years and has made peace of it. So we've skipped over the things that we've seen in origin stories in previous Fantastic Four movies where they're a bit more confident about themselves. Um, so yeah, I guess that kind of feels very, a little bit Homecoming esque in how it's like after the origin type thing. Yeah, refreshing. That's all you have to say. Refreshing. Okay. Um, so yeah, I do quite like the fight against Galactus. It's a team effort. Everyone's like giving it their all, but they don't seem too powerful. But Silver Surfer. This version of the Silver Surfer really carries. Um, and, the space waves they change colors and basically turn into paint, and are using them to blind Galactus. Yeah, but you gotta remember there's also Kang in the mix, so he's in the fight and feels more menacing than he did in, the version of him that was in Quantum Mania, in my universe anyway. Oh no, yeah, the Quantum Mania Kang of my universe, I was somewhat menacing, but people point out how easily he was defeated. Whereas this one, I feel like was more of a challenge. And it was kind of surprising when the Fantastic Four, they lost. Like it seems like Galactus ate their world. Kang has Franklin Richards and has taken Franklin, who knows where. And then the Fantastic Four and the Surfer are on this space shuttle ending up in parts unknown. And, they crash land. And they think that they're back on Earth, but it's not their own Earth. They, because of the reality warping thing, there was one last portal that Franklin opened, and they ended up presumably on the Earth of, the Marvel Cinematic Universe. But the terrain also looks a little bit like Battle World. So I'm not really sure if they're on Earth or on Battle World. It looks like Earth for a moment, and then it looks like Battle Earth for another, or Battle World for another moment. So I do kind of wonder if maybe Franklin is present there, like maybe some time has passed for him wherever he's ended up, and maybe they're about to reunite with him. Feels kind of ambiguous. Yeah, it's really stumps you. Well, all of us, I should say. And every now and then throughout the movie, Reed does mention Victor Von Doom and how they used to work in his garage, but they didn't show any flashbacks. But in the mid-credit scene, we do see, someone dressed up as Victor Von Doom, and it's the armor, the cloak, and it looks so comic book accurate. We don't see the face. I don't know if it's supposed to be a surprise or... Yeah, I don't know. Hopefully it's different from how it's being handled in my universe. Even if there is a precedent for how it seems like it's going to be in my universe, even if there is a precedent in the comics, it feels creatively bankrupt to try it in a movie the way that they're doing in my universe. But I don't know, maybe over there it'll be different, fingers crossed. But yeah, there is potential to get Doom right this time. Like he looks like Doom, but whether he feels like Doom and sounds like how you'd imagine Doom to sound, like I guess we're gonna have to wait for the next big event for that. Yeah, and I gotta mention, I also quite like how slice of life some scenes in this movie were. We got to see them feel like a family, just going out, hanging out, having some pizza, and chilling at the park and talking to friends and whatnot, and sometimes teaming up with the other superheroes. And again, while they're wearing all their masks and stuff, this really feels like a love letter to the Silver Age of comics. Yeah, I appreciate that. Really great effort. To me, I think this is a 9 out of 10 rocks, because it felt kind of weird having just one rock person. If everyone was rocks, it would have been a 10 out of 10, which is the case in my universe. So I guess the one in my universe is a 10 out of 10. Okay, yeah, that's fair. I think I'm gonna differ a little bit. Like, I really dug this movie. It feels like it captures the aesthetic of the Fantastic Four, how you would want them to. But there's still room for improvement, I would say. Some of the exposition could have been handled a bit better. So I think I'd give this 7.5 out of 10. Oh, okay. What's she saying in the chat? Okay, she says that this movie handled some topics very well, mixing what ifs with historical stuff, how the time period was, and positing how different would it have been with the impact of the Fantastic Four. And so she gives it, wow, an 8.5 out of 10. Her unit of measurement is capes. Oh, that's funny because, in Marvel, I feel like there aren't that many capes, but yeah, I guess. Oh, she says it's an Incredibles reference. No capes, and they're invisible. I guess I don't know. I forgot to say my unit of measurement. I guess it would be. Let's see. What would my unit of measurement be? Let's see. Oh, elephants. Because there was that conversation about elephants, with Reed being a scientist and reading about animals to Franklin, his kid. So, yeah. Okay, to me, so I've been kind of tired of some of the nostalgia stuff, but I think this movie handled it better than others. Maybe I'm a little bit more cynical, so I think for me it's maybe what the heck, I'll give this a 7 out of 10. Let's see, what's my unit of measurement? 7 out of 10 lectures, because Reed Richards gives some college lectures in the movie. Yeah, there were some real slice of life things, which made this feel a bit less like a superhero movie in places, but I kind of liked the downtime and how refreshing that was. But yeah, it's not the greatest thing ever, but I'm glad I enjoyed it. Maybe I'd rate the 2000s Fantastic Four movies slightly lower than this, retroactively. I probably would have rated them higher back in the day, but those movies could have been a bit better. So I think those are slightly below this. And yeah, everything else, like, yeah, I don't know. I'm just rambling at this point. All right, and with that, we'll provide the plugs. You can email delayedreplaypodcast@gmail.com. Let us know your thoughts on stretching. I don't know. I feel like we didn't describe the powers all that well in the movie, but I feel like people already know the Fantastic Four so well that you can pretty much you pretty much already get the idea. But I thought they looked pretty good in this movie. They didn't look too computerized and whatnot. But yeah, so you can follow at Steven Shinder on Instagram, Twitter /X, Threads, Steven Shinder Storytelling on Facebook. Check out Goodreads, Letterboxd, all that stuff. StevenShinder.com. Info on the Standalones and Stepping Stones novels, two of which are available on Amazon. And you can also follow Yes Shift, Father Son podcast about Yes, and with a new John Anderson album, John Anderson and the Band Geeks album True. With that release, there will be a review out, and also a show review of the Phoenix show from over a week ago. So lots of stuff happening music wise. And also check out the channel, Steven Shinder Reviews in video form. You know, all that good stuff. Whatever is available in your universe. And yeah, I just want to, before we jump off, ask the other Steven, what stuff have you been watching that you'd like to review real quick here at the end? Since the others... you know, I offered this, but they said they didn't really feel like it. But yeah, so what have you been watching? Right, so Solar Opposites, the new... this is season 5. I almost said season 6. You know, fun as usual. I did feel a little bit of fatigue with the Wall storyline. You know, they're still building out that world in the show. If you've seen the show, you know what that is. But... yeah, but I'm still invested, you know, still watching and whatnot. Caught a bit of the Rick and Morty anime that started, and I'm not really sure what to make of it. You know, it has kind of the feel of an anime, but the designs aren't super different. And yeah, I don't know. I guess maybe it has its place. Suicide Squad Isekai ended, and I thought it was decent, I guess. There wasn't one last Amanda Waller dance-off at the end, which kind of surprised me. You know, Kite Man, I've been enjoying that. And Futurama, I don't know if I mentioned this before, but new season has been airing, and it's been decent as well, even if sometimes it feels like it could go a bit further with the heartwarming stuff than it does, but you know, I enjoy these characters, this world, so still checking it out and whatnot. And watched Alien Romulus, and no spoilers, but I thought it was fine overall. And you can see the spoilery review over on the YouTube channel, Steven Shinder Reviews in video form. I think the general consensus is that if there were a thing or two that are in the movie that are very nostalgia based, like if those were just omitted, the movie would be better. But how much better might vary from person to person. But yeah, I thought it was kind of 7-ish. Like it's fine overall if you look past a couple certain elements. You know, it did its job. It was creepy and fit into the world of the movies. So yeah, I think that's pretty much it. And looking forward to this podcast being back again in 2 weeks. And without further delay, have a good day.